But you do have theological and moral convictions.
Oh, I do, but I don't feel...
And you do have an opinion on,
Sure.
Some of the specific controversies that occasionally we've differed on. So that is all true. There's an obligation to engage with people who disagree with you, to attempt to persuade and convince and change their minds and so on. That's sort of the ultimate goal.
My project really is to allow people or invite people to encounter Jesus in a way that they might not have thought of before.
I don't know if it's completely true that, that sort of things that seem innocent and simple are completely innocent and simple, in that you do have a larger worldview that you're trying to persuade people and draw people into.
My motivation on Twitter and Facebook and in America Magazine and other articles is not to get people to vote Democrat, period. That is not my goal, My motivation is really to get them to encounter Jesus. It would be the same kinds of things that I consider it the same way that I consider a homily. And that a homily may have certain political implications or overtones, but it is about the gospel, just as the stuff that Jesus said in his times had certain political implications that he was okay with. I find the debates qua debates not enjoyable for me. I would much rather, go back to my book on prayer. I don't find them enjoyable.
I think it's fair to say that, we're all engaged in an argument about the future of Catholicism right now, an argument that the Holy Father himself has sort of invited. And I think there's a frustration sometimes on the more conservative and traditional side where would-be reformers, and I'll speak generally rather than specifically, would-be reformers sometimes don't want to say that we're having an argument even as they have an argument. And so on the conservative side, there's this perpetual drive, and maybe it's a too zealous drive that's missing Jesus along the way, which is a sort of conservative or traditionalist vice, perhaps. But there's a drive to get to the actual argument. What are we actually arguing about? Which is, again, I think the thing that motivates at least some of your social media critics, not the ones just flinging ad hominem attacks, but the ones who feel that there's a debate of great moment in the history of the church going on right now that's worth having.
I think the thing that frustrates me with some of the more traditionalist Catholics is that doctrine, as you were saying, has always developed. Doctrine has developed since, Peter and Paul argued about circumcision, right? I mean, we're always sort of developing doctrine. The essentials stay the same. Of course, the question is, what are the essentials? But, I mean, we look at the Second Vatican Council. We look at even St. John Paul, and all of his social encyclicals, who in those social encyclicals developed the doctrine of the Catholic social teaching, deeper and deeper and deeper. And my frustration is that suddenly, some traditionalists, now that Francis is here, suddenly have a problem with development of doctrine.
Since Catholicism is a culture in which we all try and live and move and have our being and so on, those intellectual debates do, inevitably shape the choices people make, the way they pray, the way they believe, what they think about the person of Jesus, who they think Jesus is, to what extent do you see Jesus primarily as a figure who avoids sort of narrow and too specific answers and speaks in parables and stories and narratives and so on, and to what extent do you see Jesus as someone who does that, but also on particular questions delivers very hard to accept answers that send people running away from him because they think those answers are too hard to accept, too hard for people to live out, too difficult to believe, and so on. The central question before the church right now, boiled down, you might say, is how can doctrine, what does it mean, what do we mean when we say doctrine can develop, right? What are the limits of the development of doctrine? What can change and what can't change?
I'm now going to sound pious again. I think the central question for the church and for Catholics is, who is Jesus? I think that is the central question. I think people are still coming to encounter Jesus, and that is always going to be the question for the church, to get people to encounter Jesus. I think the development of doctrine helps people to understand that.